My name is Sarah Peters. I'm the Assistant Director of Public Programs here in the Education Department, and I'm very happy to see all of you here. I want to extend a special welcome to all of the international artists in the exhibition who are also in the house tonight. They have come from very far away to install their works that are on view upstairs, and so thank you all for being here. It's been a very exciting week at the Walker between all of the artists flying in from everywhere and the mad dash to the installation finish line. But excitingly, the exhibition Brave New Worlds, the door rolled open about 2 hours ago, and it is open. I hope that if you haven't been able to see the show yet, that you do come back sometime and spend a generous amount of time looking through the exhibition. It's well worth your time and energy. On behalf of the Walker and the curators and everyone here, I would also like to thank Anne M. Hatch and Peter and Annie Remish for their generous support of the exhibition, as well as the Consulate General of the Netherlands in New York for their support that allowed many of the artists to travel here for the opening. So if you've been upstairs, you know that there is a lot going on up there. Brave New Worlds is an exhibition of 70 works by 24 artists from 17 countries. The artists were invited to participate in the show because their work engages with a sense of responsibility to the world. And what we'll talk about tonight breaks that down a little bit. The title of the show is borrowed from Aldous Huxley's 1923 novel Brave New World, which I'm sure many of you have read, which is a book about a futuristic society in which humans are engineered to be permanently happy. And of course, this utopian civilization eventually falls apart. The title was adapted for the exhibition because the phrase Brave New World expresses an equal sense of possibility and ambivalence about the future, and this mirrors the attitudes of the artists in the show, whose views of contemporary life are both critical and hopeful. The exhibition was organized by the brave young curators Doryun Chong and Yasmil Raymond, and it encompasses a full range of contemporary art practice: film and video, photography, installation, drawing, painting, and sculpture. Tonight's panel is the first of many exciting programs for the exhibition, and the upcoming ones are all listed in your program notes, but please bear with me while I put an extra plug in for all of them. We continue with artist talks tomorrow, right here in this room in the cinema, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Turkish artist Banu Cenetoglu will be speaking about her work, and she is followed by an afternoon of artist-led gallery talks up in the exhibition that starts at 2:30. And due to some complicated travel schedules, the artists who will be presenting the gallery talks are slightly different than what was advertised, but I promise you, you won't be disappointed. We'll be hearing from Armando Andrada Tudela, Noguchi Rika, and Mirsha Kantor tomorrow afternoon. So please come back and hear from even more of the artists in the show. And then the next program is with the artist Walid Rod. He was unable to be here for the opening, so he is coming back to speak on Thursday, October 25th. That's free. We're here in the cinema at 7 o'clock. And then we're having a little mini-series later in November that we've invited 2 journalists to come and talk about the way that journalists reflect the world. And the first is Joe Sacco, the comics journalist. He will be speaking on Tuesday, November 13th, also at 7 o'clock. And he is followed in 2 weeks by Janine DiGiovanni, who is an American woman who is a top world foreign correspondent who writes for the British press. She will be here on Tuesday, November 27th, also at 7 p.m. And all of those programs are also advertised in a beautiful brochure that you can pick up on your way out from the front desk. So tonight's panel will attempt to address the concepts of political consciousness and the many ways that those things work themselves into contemporary visual language. We have 4 of the exhibition's artists here to unpack that idea, and their conversation will be moderated by the curators. Runa Islam was born in Bangladesh and lives and works in London. She works in film and installation. Her piece, Timelines, is her first film shot on 35mm, and it captures, like much of her work, the indelible beauty of things generally considered to be of low cultural value. And in this case, she films a series of tourist attractions engineered in Barcelona at the turn of the century. Using the camera as an active participant, Islam takes viewers on a journey in which futuristic visions, nostalgia, space, and time are folded back on themselves. Haegue Yang lives and works in Seoul and Berlin and was born in South Korea. Her installation upstairs, titled Blind Room, is an arrangement of moving images and familiar objects that work together to create a rather unfamiliar environment. In this room, the elements of image, sound, light, heat, and cold may be seen as stand-ins for human beings and the various emotional and psychological states we carry that render us either capable or incapable of relating to others and to the world. Dan Perjovschi lives in Romania and lives and works, was born in Romania and lives and works still in Bucharest. And if you've traversed the stairwell between galleries 4 and 6 this evening or earlier this week, then you know something about Dan Perjovschi. His drawings adorn the walls of that stairwell and manage, through the simplicity of black lines on white walls, to bring together sharp wit and politics in drawings that function simultaneously as a hearty laugh and a punch in the gut, although friendly punch in the gut. And lastly, Jorge Maki was born in Argentina and lives and works in Buenos Aires. In his works, Lilliput and Nuevo Mundo, which are upstairs, Maki takes on the role of a mad cartographer, cutting up and rearranging the land masses of the globe into new maps. And for these works on paper, he ultimately asks us to rethink the implicit authority of maps and the systems of information that they employ. So we are very lucky to have all of these artists here in one room on the stage for tonight, and to have those in the audience and the ones that will be speaking tomorrow. So please join me in welcoming the Brave New World's artists.
Good evening. My name is Doryun Chong, and I'm the co-curator of Brave New World. And perhaps we should go down the table and introduce ourselves so people know who's who. Just state your name. Starting.
Hello, good evening. I'm Haegue Yang.
I'm Doryun Chong. My name is Perjovschi.
I'm Runa Islam.
I'm Jorge Maki.
I'm Yasmil Raymond, the other co-curator.
So I guess we are purportedly the moderators, two curators, but you know, all of us are pretty exhausted, so hopefully we'll be coherent for the next hour or so. And we're gonna wing it. We're gonna freestyle, and I think that will be actually kind of interesting to. We didn't really want to. Take turns and talk about each of our practices or ideas, and I thought maybe it would be more interesting to bounce ideas off each other. But just to start off, maybe I'll read a few quotes. Sarah did a great introduction explaining where the title of the exhibition comes from, inspired by Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, published in 1932, if I may add correction, 1923. One of the great early 20th century novels about future utopia or dystopia, which also includes George Orwell's 1984, which was published about, I think, 15 years later. So Huxley's book is really one of the great visionary books in the early 20th century literature. But we weren't just inspired by this literary precedent, but we originally came to this concept, in Yasmil and I, in the course of discussing and trying to define what the conceptual contour of this exhibition was going to be. We're more inspired by the everyday use of the phrase Brave New World. So I Googled quickly, just 30 minutes ago, and went to Google News to see how it is used in, in newspaper headlines and articles, and here are a few of them. Brave New World of online fraudsters, the Brave New World of electronic layoffs, stunning novel delves into Brave New World of martial arts, This might be my favorite. The world of luxury is a brand new world in a brave new world. And this one is a quote, and I think it really goes well with Huxley's book, and I believe many of you have read it, probably in high school. And, you know, I mean, this is a society where kind of natural human reproduction has been eliminated, and humans are mass-produced, like in a factory in an assembly line. And this sentence comes from an article that discusses in vitro fertilization. So it goes, in the brave new world opened up by reproductive technologies, reproduction has become a transaction between consumers and suppliers in a market of reproductive services. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the phrase, and I think the way Sarah put it was that brave new world as a phrase in everyday parlance conveys both a sense of, I don't know what your wording was exactly, but optimism as well as a certain level of trepidation and fear for what's happening, what's to come. And that is an important sense we wanted to convey in this exhibition, that, you know, this is an exhibition of works and practices that are simply critical, but also offer hopes.
And since we don't speak English as a first language, we added an S. A misappropriation of the title. Because it seemed very complicated to follow the track of Huxley, right, where everything goes so dystopian in this new one world order. And we realized that as we were understanding the practice of the artists that we invited and trying to respect their individualities and not try to make any obscene generalization, that we needed to make it a plural because everybody presented in itself a different planet, a different satellite, right? And that together they were this galaxy. So, you know, this is how the S got added to the title. Doryun, do you want me to hit with the first question?
Hit?
Throw it, huh? Okay, so you accepted our invitation to be part of this show. Dan Perjovschi, how do you see your practice fitting into the final concept of this exhibition that we put together? Since you're the adult on the table.
I get stuck at the first word, brave. Listen, I was, as any invitation I get for shows, I'm becoming very curious. I'm curious about what curators want, I'm curious about the place I'm going, I'm curious about how I will react. So I didn't process very much the concept of the thing. But as in any other experience, and maybe sometimes here a little bit more because the American environment is much more challenging in terms of questioning, and you know, you give a lecture, people ask you. You go in the Nordic countries, nobody asks you nothing. So in this kind of terms, I had like mixed feelings because lately in the art scene I'm involved, I saw a lot of shows and I have to tell you I didn't like them a lot. So on the other hand, so I somehow lost curiosity about the art world. And on the other hand, I'm always amazed sometimes how the sensitivity of my colleagues artists are representing or are researching into their own field. So I was curious to see that. Now, I'm coming from a post-communist country, and I survived one society and I'm living in another one now. And I was part of that initial, in 1989, like upraising and inventing a new world. And I was part of it directly because I, from being a simple artist, unknown somewhere, I become like part of the mechanism of a big structure called Ministry of Culture. And I was part of it because we want to change it and we want to do a new culture and stuff. So I had this kind of enormous enthusiasm and then the depression, because things are not happening as quick as you want and as good as you want and then exactly how you want. So when I come here, I have all this package with me. I also have this geographical relativity, because I'm coming from a part of the world which constantly shifts notions. So I've been seen 10 years ago as an East Central European, sometime later as an East European, then as Southeast European, then I'm coming now from Balkans, and I never moved from Bucharest. So I had this in my mind, and that's connected with the idea of a world, how it is defined, and maybe how Jorge is cutting it, and we combine it. So I came here with all this, and I have to tell you that I like it. I really enjoy it, and I'll keep thinking about this. And it's kind of interesting because you come to a show and then you got a catalog, and then you start to read the catalog, and then I made this tour with you in the morning with the press, and then you hear, and I was like, oh, now I know. Now I know, but it's a bit too late. So.
Okay.
I don't know if I answered.
No, yes.
But I keep talking, no?
Well, I think it's a question that we can perhaps kind of continue to ask a little bit to other artists, because I think it is, it's an anxiety-provoking thing for curators to organize this sort of an exhibition that is driven more by an idea or a concept. It's not a painting show. It's not about a period, or it's not about a country. So in a sense, the logic isn't necessarily inherent in in our proposal. So, admittedly, it was really hard for us to, we always kind of approach with a little sense of anxiety and nervousness that, is this artist going to take the invitation or not? But of course, everybody responds in different ways, and we're very lucky that, from what I remember, all artists that we extended invitation to accepted our invitation.
Some made us difficult demands, like we had to meet them twice.
But,
in Frankfurt.
it was just the enthusiasm was great, and then so we're kind of doing this in a retrospective way, and as you can see from just a few PowerPoint images, and what Sarah said, these 4 artists, just a slice of the list of 24 artists have widely varying practices, so that's why we're sort of asking this very open question, why did you accept our invitation, and how did you imagine? Because I think it's natural that each person's answer obviously had to come from a very different place. So, thank you.
I think I accept this invitation without reflecting so much, I have to admit.
All right.
This is nothing actually negative, or neither negative or positive. Maybe it might sound very negative. But this blindness that you are kind of ignorant, this empty void, is usually my starting point very often. It is kind of neutral. It's seemingly neutral surface that I can reflect myself, and with my narrow-minded view and life, as well as limited experience, I try to deal with the word. This is the way how I deal with the word is definitely not filled with confidence or like certainty, but I think in that moment of like the vulnerability, I see some space that I can reflect the others. I think that's more or less what I'm talking about in 3 videos, which are included in the installation piece upstairs. And in this trilogy of video essays, I'm quite much talking about like my own weakness and the lack of strength to deal with the word, with very confessional voice. That's what I offer. And these videos are integrated in the installation with a lot of sense experiences, like smell, temperature, humidity, heat and cold, showers, etc. These are quite abstract sense experiences, as well as the most of like lightings I'm using in the installation. And in this maybe not coherent sense experience, I see actually the territory where we could meet with each other. This abstractness of sense experience is quite democratic to me. It's the surface that we can meet without seeing with each other, without really noticing with each other. It's quite blind date-like. That's why the installation called like this blind room. Also, it is marked and zoned through the half-transparent the blinds. It filters the light, but not necessarily close down your visual ability, and it just filter, and you feel kind of like comforted by, surrounded by this blind, and you walk through, and you see the shadows of others outside, but you also becomes kind of shadow if you are seen by the others from outside. Now I get a little bit too descriptive, I think, which I don't intend it to it. Yeah, I think the rest of it maybe I can get through the questions.
And you, Runa, what do you think?
In response to your invitation.
Yeah, or the parameters that we develop in the show, because in relationship to your practice, like how does it fit in, or does it correspond, or is this a new direction, or you feel like we misunderstood, or?
I mean, what's interesting, just to go back to the first question of why we might have said yes, I would say the title was quite an interesting one for me because of the idea it's of a period it was written, and of course the title itself emerged from the title of the book, but it could be used at any point in the past or the present, and I thought it was quite an actually maybe a wonderful invitation to be asked to be part of a show that would then try to represent a period of art that could be seen as a new sort of strong gesture, or kind of a new testing of parameters, and where I'd fit into that, and actually to think about an artist who works sometimes kind of within a field. It's really actually always an kind of positive experience when you're invited into a group show of a certain period, and of course from the way Yasmil has their way of convincing you, and Doryun as well, that it seemed like a really challenging kind of group of intention, and also a really great group of artists. So I was really happy to actually be included in that, so to be said in the same breath as all the other artists. And then to see how my work fits in, it's quite interesting to sort of walk around the exhibition and realise that there are a lot of similar thought processes, but an incredibly different range of ways of working with maybe very similar, like-minded attitudes, but the incredible diversity in the output. And I would say maybe my work is at one extreme of that, because it's very particular, and I'm working with a very sort of reduced set of coordinates through which I would like to look at the world. So it's quite interesting to think of the Brave New World as something that's a sort of microcosm that you can turn inside out and look at the world through that.
And the cartographer on the table?
So I think that the S in the end of the title is very important because it's relating to the idea of several worlds living together, and these several worlds are different. And I feel I am something like a romantic artist. Romantic from the 19th century, no, not. And I believe the artist is creating a world that is completely different of the real world. And this is why I think this S is very important. At the same time, the title has kind of irony, and irony is a very important part of my way of working. When I was invited to this show, I thought, well, I think this show was made for me.
Okay.
In a very figurative way, because at that time I was creating these maps that you saw upstairs, and I feel they are something like nightmares, something like if you have something like a drunk god working with or playing with the world, and then you have as a result you have these three maps, and
perhaps I should describe a little bit what you mean by that. Is a god, it will be a god that will take chances, right? There is a colorist god.
So do you think I can describe the works now?
Well, if you like.
Okay. So the first one you find there in the exhibition, it is called New World. Sorry. And what I did there was to put in first term the idea of a formal thing, so the color. So the most important thing in a map of the world is just the color, no nationality, no anything. So it's a kind of new order for the world. On the other work, you only see the meridians and parallels, and everything has disappeared. Everything in the middle has disappeared. So it's again something formal that comes to the first term, you say? The first en primer plano. I don't know how to say
Forward.
that.
To the forefront.
And the other one that is called Lilliput, it was something like, it was a nightmare to do it. Because I cut out all the countries from a map of the world, and I threw them on a piece of paper. Some of the countries fell down face up, and some of them fell face down. And I left them as they fell. I glued them on the paper, and then I started taking measurements between the cities in the different countries, something like the relative distances between the cities in the countries, but the distances in millimeters. So the distances they had in the actual paper. So in the end, what you have is something like a tiny world, something like it's something impossible to live, or maybe we are so little that we can fit in this world. Just in front of these two last maps, there is a river, and this river is a cement river. It's the Tevere in Rome, and you see pieces of cement and the divisions. So the spaces between the blocks are in fact the bridges. Okay, well, what else can I say?
No, I think just to lead us into a direction of maybe another question is that this preoccupation with the title of the show, I think, not to exhaust the conversation on that, but for me it's important to go back to Dan's comment about the uncomfort with the word bravery, because for me, as we were conceiving the show, I kept saying to people, or to Doryun, and when we had to talk about it abstractly to everybody to convince the walker to do this, we will use the idea that making art today in this day and age, right, after the events that have happened most recently and how we are in the direction which we're going, seems to me to be an act of bravery, that the act of an artist to take materials and to trust their hands or their ideas to convey and communicate visually. So it's really a courageous act for me. And so for us, we were looking at bravery from that perspective, less than the military tone or revolutionary tone, because I think we were considering what Doryun then called this consciousness. There's this idea that the work that you made and the artists who are here tonight, that you will go and see in the galleries, are very invested not only in their localities, in the things that are immediate to them, that they're responding, but also to us that are far away from them. So it felt like it spoke so directly to our reality as well, than your reality or your reality where you live and the work is about. That was not a question. Doryun, help me. I suppose, well, I guess I can come up with a question, is that, so how do you feel being here in Minneapolis? Because some of you have shown in New York or maybe in other places in the United States, but we're in the Midwest, right? This is, for many of you, your first time, right? So seeing the context of where you are presenting your work, how does that make you feel? Is it a big stretch from what you're used to?
In fact, I knew the institution, the Walker Art Center, by books. I've never been there here. And what is impressive for me, coming from Buenos Aires, is that maybe that professionality can be this work where it exists.
But in terms of being in America, showing your work, do you feel any, at this moment, or maybe I'm not posing an intelligent question, we can drop it, Doryun?
Finish.
You're saying, you're talking about what? About the actual situation now?
Yes, the political situation in which we
No, but I am sure that one thing is George Bush and Texas and some parts of Texas. And another thing is the rest of the people. So I know that the majority of the people here in the United States had voted George Bush 2 times. Shame on you. But anyway, if we can't generalize, I am sure we can't generalize. There will be always people who can dialogue with our things, and so I know that there are very negative things, but I think it's impossible to generalize. This is what I think.
But I think we always share this kind of incertitude, because we are coming to an we are not coming exactly to a city. We are coming to an institution, to a platform. You don't even sometimes have enough time to look in the city because you are looking to white walls or to talk with people who help you to install.
Yeah.
So it's more like an atmosphere and an ambience around you. So I don't know if I myself I can't make now like a big statement about. But of course they are different for me, because I'm attentive to several details. I look and I saw an enormous number of free newspapers in this city. And you start to wonder why so. And then you look at the architecture downtown usually, which is very strict and very massive. And you also think, what is this? So there are like kind of hints around, and that may come to some kind of conclusion or maybe not. But I want to tell you something else. Like I grew up in a place where I was forced to be national. I was caught in some kind of nationality. And then all my growing up and making myself an artist was kind of seeking internationality. And also, in a way, not paradoxically, but interesting that you're showing in group shows, and you're always, after your name, it's a name of a country or a name of a city, or you're always described again as a kind of nationality. And I don't know if you are guiding yourself after that. I don't know if you can read my country or my countrymen, or like the way people think. So it's interesting because we are speaking in this show about a kind of failed utopia, no? About something designed to be happy and it's failing, no? And I'm coming from a failed utopia, which is still have some kind of songs and some kind of tunes around. People still listen to that tunes. Kind of society which can be perfect, and it cannot. And I think for me, under this umbrella of this show, it's also like researching this, kind of contemplating. Even though I'm working with actuality in the last 5 minutes, but I think I still think about it. And I'm very grateful that I have the chance again to think about this.
Well, just to maybe
see, I got from a question about Minneapolis to Utopia. See?
well, perhaps we can bring it back. Well, I want to kind of sort of develop that idea of international or internationalism, which in more recent decades has kind of morphed into global, which was one question that we had. And also I think there is kind of blind internationalism, and there is perhaps more conscious internationalism, I think, which we kind of try to convey in this exhibition. And it is true that, we didn't change the normal institutional practice of identifying artists with their birthplace and where they work. And while most of you travel a lot and have shown all over the world, and I guess one important premise for us is that something has happened in art making and contemporary art making in recent years, perhaps, that if art was about transcendence, that I guess there are always specific places of departure and specific subjects, but there was a certain expectation by definition that the final product is supposed to transcend that specificity. It seemed like now you can talk about particular places and particular situations, and that can be good and serious art making as well. And I would just kind of sort of give one example. Perhaps it's on both sides of art making as well as kind of curatorial practice. And I think the reason why I first personally really got interested in one of the artists who's here in the room, Eric van Lieshout, who's from the Netherlands, is because I had a lot of preconceptions about what the Netherlands represented, as the place of liberalism, and then suddenly when we started hearing in the last couple of years about all the events that were happening, there were sort of 2 back-to-back murders of very well-known figures. First was a politician named Pim Fortuyn, who was a very paradoxical figure, very openly gay, but also ultra right-wing, xenophobic, and completely polarizing kind of politician who was murdered by, I think, animal rights activists, I think, and then immediately followed by, even more incendiary event of the murder of Theo van Gogh, who was the filmmaker and the cultural commentator. And then by second-generation Moroccan Dutch. Eric's work is really jarring. You will see an example of that in this exhibition. His kind of confrontation of the issues of immigration and xenophobia, as well as the sexuality, and a lot of prejudices that are present very much in the Dutch society, really kind of opened my eyes. And the fact that he was making art about it's very documentary, but it's also very performative, and he's talking about very specific issues that are very specific to Dutch society, but it has certain kinds of universal resonance. Made me realize and helped me come up with this concept that a lot of serious art making nowadays can be done by talking about specific issues that cannot necessarily be shared by everyone else. And just to kind of finish that thought, and very fittingly, what he's presenting here is about America and its connection to the Middle East, aptly titled Homeland Security, which is also what I see as a kind of very touching road movie and friendship movie between Eric and longtime editor Cora van der Hoeven, who's also here. So I guess to kind of bring it back, what was important for us, this was a premise for us that, we didn't want to make a political exhibition or politicized exhibition, but we came to you with this idea of political consciousness. And the way that we defined it to you is that, how do you become a world citizen, a citizen of the world who's also very receptive and responsible to the whole world as well as the place you live in. And from my memory, everybody was intrigued by that question.
Yeah, I think for me, like I saw in many works in this show, I very clearly perceived artistic statement of impossibility to anticipate this world in which we live in. It has a different rhetoric. Sometimes it deals with the issues, or sometimes it goes beyond these issues and showing the abstractness of the confrontation and antagonism taking place in the world. But I think in various ways, even if, as Doryun addressed this, it's not really making a specific stories. It's not about the storytelling anymore, but it's rather a political consciousness stating that we won't anticipate the issues in the world. And that was quite touching in many ways. And also I was very touched by the film by Eric, that it is a kind of romantic road movie, like starting from Los Angeles, going to the New Mexico, and the other parts are showing like all over places in Israel. But what you see is actually the impossibility of commentating about the political issues, overlapped by the intimacy and very singular way of like revealing subjectivity. And I share that perspective and as well as sensitivity very much.
And I think that impossibility is also very present, Runa, in your work. This idea of the architecture that you depicted that wanted to give access to an impossible view. Mm-hmm. Almost. Would you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think what's quite interesting is maybe just to relate it back to political consciousness as a term, and how I think every artist and the position of the exhibition is actually embedded with the consciousness, because essentially it tries to reframe and address the more dominant, powerful situations which, as Haegue just said, can't really be considered as a whole. And just as I saw in Sean Snyder's work, where it's not possible to tell the truth itself because you just can't tell all of it. And it relates back to even is it Lawrence Vino on the outside of your building? Yeah, these bits and pieces that are parts of a semblance of a whole. And for me, that's very present in the way that I try to deal with places that you may otherwise not get to. And I think in a lot of the artworks, it's maybe a kind of impulse or a vision or a position that maybe wouldn't be addressed if you turned on the telly, you know, or if you opened a newspaper, and if we all talk about Eric's work, but just to think that, you know, there's it gives voice to attitudes that might not actually ever be heard, and that's the difference between maybe a culture that's mediated and a kind of more raw culture that's coming out from exhibitions where we're able to really get to these positions. More specifically about my own way of working is to try to get the piece that's in the galleries upstairs. It's a work about this kind of future where we try to get to see and look and purvey and consume visually everything from this kind of position of God and the all kind of pervading eye, and using vehicles and mechanical objects or engineered kind of structures that would give us that kind of vantage point. And maybe the ridiculousness of it as well. And I think that's sort of the stripe to my work, where there's a sort of comical circus-like ridiculousness which could go in stride with this idea of a failed utopia.
Okay. How are we feeling? Should we open up for questions? Or should we... Not yet? Okay. I'll take it back.
We have no sense of time. It's kind of ironic in some ways.
I just want to add something that being here, me being here, because for me, like, this show is the first proper show I'm taking part in America. I'm based in Europe since 13 years, and I'm very conscious about like this, the difference of perspective through my status as a foreigner living in Europe. And I'm not even, I mean, there are many different kind of foreigners, and I'm not European foreigners in Europe, and quite much worked professionally, only professionally worked in Europe. And it all the time gives me, being in America gave me like positive, constructive reflection to my status in general. It was for me interesting to see my European colleagues being here in very privileged institution. As Dan mentioned, art institutions are for us kind of a greenhouse. Of course, whatever happens outside, we are well treated and seriously treated, and especially like the institution like Work Art Center with its devotion and like belief in art and love for art. It is a very safe place, but I think that because it is...
What kind of cold?
I have to agree.
It's for the art. It's for the art. It's very important.
we are regarded as an art object, not as a human being. So temperature is actually...
Well, that's why you have the heat lamp in your installation, so people can warm themselves.
Please come and warm me up. And I think it's like moving around as an artist is a very superficial act. Like you are usually back and forth between hotel and the working space, which is an institution, and not really experience so much. So our life is not that glamorous as it looks like from outside. It's most of the time even poor and dry. But then again, you kind of get an impression of the place, and you kind of have a like prejudice or assumption, and you get it confirmed or proved as wrongly or positively, and this kind of process of going through the place, drifting around, is very significant as much as it's superficial. And I think for me, like facing it and confronting it as my own truth is an ethical statement. It's very different from the journalistic perspective that you are proved as wrong or false. Mm-hmm. You are proved as a truth or fact that which really exists in the world. And I think for that, like, I'm not more or less than any other being in the world. And this relativeness of like, drifting around in the world, which I cannot anticipate, unfortunately or fortunately, that's what I experience every day. And that's my everyday life and everyday experience, which is neither overwhelming nor so poor.
So is that the opposite of then when you say you never moved from Bucharest, but your identity has changed 4 times over the last 15 years?
I'm super trained to look at these paradoxes. You know, I mean, like now, my country did the revolution because people they had too cold in their homes. And now you see this freezing to death because it's kind of good to conserve them. So I'm trained to do this. And I can give a numerous example about that and how meaning of something is shifting because the context shifts. Mm-hmm. And so, or what's something which is supposed to be very healthy and good now, in 10 years' time, it's proved to be cancerous or whatever. Mm-hmm. You know? So, but I want to come back to the show and this idea of being brave and the brave new. And I think sometimes it's just you have to be brave not only to do art, but you have to be brave just to wake up and continue with the day. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of bravery with maybe tiny acts in our world. And me in this show, I just want to say this, I'm always impressed by so many nuances and strategy and which other artists have. And it's like if you can imagine, if you can expand this show, and you can imagine that in this very moment there are some hundreds of thousands sensibilities which are researching something, and they produce or they do something. It's amazing. So this can be something good about the world we live. Mm-hmm. That this is preserving and somehow creating spaces for this sensibility. Mm-hmm. And also coming to this title of ours here. I'm from a more affirmative kind of statement in what is concerned the place of the artist and its political being. I think I'm trained enough to have the same importance as a politician when I do a statement about the world I'm living. And I don't want to be arrogant in this, but I have enough trainments and enough sensibility and enough knowledge to try to be in the same time direct and empathic, and to find a solution, and in my case a graphical solution to some kind of complex story, but not forgetting the kind of humanity we have to stay on. Even if you find it or you criticize it, and sometimes I do very harsh criticism, still conserving a kind of empathy and understanding of the world we live. So I try to understand it with this form, and I think a lot of the artists do this, and they do very well, and their statements have to be taken in consideration not only in the kind of cultural world, but in world in general. That's kind of nice, no? No,
Very nice. I'm ready. Okay, where's Sarah? Sarah is saying yes. So we should like lower the slides and let you ask the questions. Save us from embarrassment. We see a hand.
Okay. The title, the Brave New Worlds, is something that is adopted, manipulated, and sold in our media. And while it has iconic an iconic nature, it also has, as you mentioned, a sort of commercial nature. And I just wanted you to talk about your either reactions to this, if this has any point of contact in your work, and what that means for you.
You mean how the phrase has become commercialized or over-popularized?
Yes, yeah, and how does that relate to the work, if you feel like you had to work against that, or if you feel like that had any bearing on your work?
Appropriated? Well, maybe let me try to change that a little bit for you, Haegue, because one of the important concepts that you've been working a lot with is community of absence. What is that in relation to?
But I don't think I understood the question. I'm sorry.
Did I not understand the question?
Do you? Do you understand it? Because I'm sorry. Okay, like.
I guess the idea is that it seems like the art that we are trying to make is something that is beyond or detached or somehow fights against what is so prevalent in our culture, which is a commercialization. And so, but you mentioned in the beginning how you Googled all of these, the title in different in different commercial ways, mm-hmm. and so was that taken into consideration in the making of the art? Was it reacted against? Was it something? You use a reference that is now a commercialized reference.
I think it's less about commercialization, but it was sort of Brave New World. I mean, that's 3 very nice words. But when you put them together as a phrase, it conveys ambivalence. When you say Brave New World of online fraudsters, I mean, that's not very nice.
But I think maybe he's asking if the artist reacted to this title, and the answer is
right.
no.
So like for me,
work was selected. There's no reaction to the title from the works.
We are put in categories. Some are brave, some are.
So I guess one of the places to start with is you had created your pieces already, and then those pieces were selected rather than creating pieces that fit into the space. Is that correct?
I guess it is about artistic practice as well as kind of curatorial practice, because it was a pretty open proposal. We tried to keep it as open proposal as possible. In a sense, it's kind of wishy-washy, right? I mean, if you say, well, we wanted to convey like sense of criticality as well as hope,
But the thing is when you, well, at least when we were doing this exhibition, you are taking all your cues from the artworks, right? So they are the ones that are telling us the story, that they give us the ideas. Mm-hmm. Jorge Maki was right by saying that this exhibition was tailored to his work, because in a way it's their work that were giving us the cue to go towards something that ended up being called Brave New World.
And it's really an organic process, at least from our end. And I think, since it was an organic process for us, it was probably the same on the other end. But perhaps we had a bigger view of it because we were dealing with 24 artists. I don't think there was a single instance when we said, "Oh, I want, we want this from you because it will fit our concept." And normally they would say, "Oh, interesting," and then they will come back, "What about this?" Right. So it always, it was always kind of back and forth. Perhaps with Dan it was a little bit different because we knew that he was going to create the work on site, and we give him literally. The blank wall, and he comes up with it. So, it was never really kind of illustrated process of, here's our concept. If you agree to it, this is what we want from you.
Yeah, no, it's more complex than that. Yeah, it's like doing an anthology. Like if you're an editor and you have to put together an anthology, you try to get the best pieces of writing that will fit into a certain subject. And also when you are then laying out the space, it's an experience. Exhibitions are experiences, so we were really then going after a certain experience. Don't think that these people are making a judgment by leaving the theater. They have to go back to class, and we were told. No, but I wanted to continue that thought because, for example, Runa, when we were talking about what piece from Runa, because of course I wanted all, like many of them, and I couldn't. But I keep saying, no, we need to keep you in the last room because it just makes sense. Towards the end of the show, there's a necessity. We need to go back to history, come back to the reality. So it becomes really about the experience of what we were after. Doryun used an analogy about music this morning, and I think it's very much so. There's a certain composition.
I think I had my very unique or private interpretation of this title of the exhibition, which Doryun said it consists of 3 words: brave, new word. For me, brave was translated very immediately into vulnerable. And new was translated in something is absent, but which is very aspired for. And the word was confronted by the concept of a singular being. I mean, there is a singular being dealing with this big concept of word, which is a struggling moment. And I think...
So it was a complete inverse of what it was. Like complete antonym of brave world.
That was not conscious to me. But then again, like forming this, like taking part in this show is for me like affirming that I want to deal with this conversion or whatever it is understood. And there was actually the engagement of mind that I want to deal with this title. I want to deal with this the concept where many different works will be included. But there was a kind of confidence from my side towards the other colleagues. They must be actually able to deal with this concept because, I mean, our time, I think we cannot really anticipate like how we looks like in the world. And there were many. I mean, I have seen many practices which were poetic enough, even if it was very engaged. And I saw like the Jorge's work. I didn't know his work before, but I saw immediately, like in this paper cuts and the fragile lines, the scissor made, like very fragile but very strong will of engagement, but still didn't lose its poetics.
Okay, I just want to preface this, but I walked in here thinking this was a Bela Tarr film.
We are.
So when I'm like, where's Bela Tarr? Where's Damnation? Or whatever it was. So, but I just caught the last 10 minutes of your talk, and I don't know what it's all about, but my question is...
You still have a question, no?
I have a question, yeah. My question is, like, when you were talking about this stuff, this one quote by Carlos Fuentes, this Mexican novelist, came into my mind and kept rolling around. And his quote is, he recently said that the old world is becoming new, and the new world is becoming old. And I have my own interpretation of that, I guess. But I think he's right on in a certain sense. And I was just wondering what you can just take that quote and just say whatever you want about it. But anybody can say, the Romanian guy, maybe? I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, I don't understand exactly the question.
What's your...
Old world is becoming new, new world is becoming old. How do you interpret the expression?
Do we have a movie somewhere? No.
No, I told earlier, probably in the 10 minutes you've been here, then I'm very attentive to paradoxes and the fact that how meaning changed. I'm coming from a country where we did strikes for a free television. We strike to have television. So look at the television. I mean, I come also from a context where people separate people because some of us left from the country, therefore they didn't eat the same shitty salami the rest of the country eat. And that shitty salami was based on soya. Now soya is healthy. Is this enough?
That's right. Now we need to read
For the curators, is it more difficult to put together a medium-driven show or a concept-driven show?
Yasmil?
Bueno, I'm a young, brave curator, so I haven't got the chance yet to do a medium-based show. No, I think at the same time, look, this exhibition, it's guided by mediums, I think. It is a medium-based show, too. I think it's an art show, right? So I just think it's a different exercise, in the sense, it depends. I don't know if I could do it, actually, I don't know, because I think the concept of that artists are dealing with are very interesting to me. And the generalization that, okay, let's say if it's just how artists are using film today, okay, yeah, there's so many, that's too open. I think at some point you have to start narrowing, because Runa has an agenda that is not just about filmmaking, or Mirsha Kantor is not just about making films. Or artists who are making sculpture, well, you know, Tomás Aracena is making sculpture, one could say, but he's also making environments that invite a certain situation, so then you enter a different minefield. So I think those generalizations of our history were very, in a way, can be very like a cul-de-sac, right, for art, for understanding the practice of art making. So maybe that answers my perspective on that. What do you think, Doryun?
Ditto.
Batman and Robin in action. Paul. Oh, no, Kathy.
Well, Yasmil, you were saying that making art today, after the events, presumably of 9/11, etc., is an act of bravery itself. And my question is just, you know, art historically, when hasn't it been?
Yeah, no, I think it's just...
Sheila not brave? You know?
No, absolutely. I think it is. But I think what Dan was pointing out was, now I'm very interested in thinking that actually waking up in the morning is an act of bravery. Yeah? And so I think, I totally agree with Dan on that.
Do you think better art comes out of screwed up times?
Sorry?
Does better art come from
during
screwed up times.
I know. I don't want to.
I think some questions cannot be answered. It can be only proved by the history. And I think that the history tells us that many crises brought like good art, but it's not the question that we on the panel can answer. And also like the comment of like after 9/11, the whole art making itself became like bravery. I kind of agree only under the condition that this art is addressing to the politicalness. Because like mentioning about politics itself is like such a difficult act to do, and the act of political speech became difficult job. But I think like we can say like it's constant march, and it will go on, but it takes like different shape maybe. Mm-hmm.
Hi there. I'm glad to be here with you guys.
Hi, Paul.
Hi. I have that guy's question, or actually the answer that he solicited is kind of one that I'm interested in too, which is in this country, as you know, politics is very narrowly defined to electoral politics, and within that narrow definition, we have black and white. We have Republican or Democrat. We have for move on, against move on, for the troops, for the terrorists, whatever. It's all black and white. And I guess this question comes from from Dan's work and what he was talking about Bucharest. But I feel like it's interesting that there's no one on stage that's born in the contiguous 48 states, and maybe you can teach us something about a different way of looking at politics, which is interrogative, which, like Dan's work, seems to be funny, and it doesn't really claim sides. Like it seems like you don't always have one side that you are choosing. It's in every situation you kind of need to interrogate the situation and be ever vigilant, rather than I'm a Democrat, so I have to believe this, or and I guess I'm kind of doing what he did, which is just pontificating and wanting you to respond. But maybe you can tell us about sort of that other definition of politics that sometimes we don't get in the U.S. and how art fits into that kind of politics. Does that make any sense?
Was the question addressed to this?
Anybody? It was inspired by Dan, but you can all answer it because you all seem to have that kind of fluidity of history or background where you haven't had to choose just one team to be on,
I think it's like opposing to this black and white of yours. My background, my country is like confusing politics. So you don't see if there are too many nuances. But I agree with you. I think being political, even when you hear political art, is kind of something. But I think it's much more complex indeed, and it can be addressed in a wide range. And I don't think we can teach something, but. What we show our practices here, and some of these practices have these angles, and maybe even taking part sometime, even being liberal or whatever. So that's my explanation. I prefer a bit black and white.
That's why we didn't paint the wall any color plan.
Well, I kind of agree with that in the sense that, I think one's sense of social subjectivity is, very much defined by categorization. I mean, I think that's just the way that we're socialized, and that's how our brain works in many ways. So perhaps for me as a first-generation immigrant, person of color, in the United States, coming from the West Coast originally, maybe like I have certain political identification, and then that really gets tripped up when you, again get confronted with situation like, what I've learned about what happened in the Netherlands, so I'm like, what do you mean that here's a gay politician who's xenophobic? You know what I mean? Like, certain kind of alliances that I made in this country, about whether it's for me, like, Pan-Asian American, kind of more leftist political movement, that also gets aligned with, gay and lesbian politics, all those things have, I don't know if it is black and white, but, it has a certain kind of configuration. And, in other parts of the world, because I don't understand exactly what the logic is, you assume that the logic is the same, but it's totally different. And, this is, so I think that's where it gets really interesting for you, that, if you don't, I don't think, I mean, for me at least, I don't think I necessarily have a fluid sense of political reality. I know that I have a pretty good sense of how rigid my political consciousness, and not political consciousness, but like, my politics is, but it gets problematic each place you go to, because each place has slightly different logic and historical context that I don't quite understand. And I think for me that's when it gets really productive and interesting. Like in the United Kingdom, the way that this politics of race plays out is totally different, and the way they understand multiculturalism is completely different, So I think that's when it gets really interesting. This kind of alignments that we think, liberal, conservative. We have a pretty clear definition of parties and what kinds of people you are. That works differently in every place you go. Sometimes a place like Turkey, I mean, can you be, I mean, I can't really explain it, but, this maybe whole idea of, can military be the upholder of secularism, which seems like, I mean, it doesn't really work that way in Latin America, and because it's different religiously, and, it's different in just so many different ways. So again, I think, you can, in a sense, you can't avoid how your consciousness and subjectivity is formed by your context. But that's why we want to have this conversation, because it really tests your assumptions.
I have a question about the ambivalence that you both mentioned about the title, which I find to be really useful and a sort of really interesting point of how to explore the role of art in politics. And I guess my question is more directed towards the artists and how they might feel about a certain kind of ambivalence about the role of art in a globalized market, and how you might see yourselves as artists who, on the one hand, are very invested in possibly asking questions about politics that might be very difficult, but on the other hand, might find yourselves, and you can say whether or not this is true, but you might find yourselves in very comfortable positions in certain contexts of being invited to participate in shows like this. And and I'm thinking more broadly about the role of biennials, and the fact that more and more art that is seen as being outside the market is actually very much part of a global market. And so I wanted to know if you had any feelings about that as working artists, as people that are still trying to ask questions about politics.
I guess it's quite like, even though we're probably trying to conflate the ideas of politics in the sort of capital P and the small p, but the sense that the art politics, I would say, could be also seen as a politic. And that, I mean, in that realm, then I guess the Walker Art Centre is actually a kind of dominant voice. So it sort of becomes quite interesting that we none of us said no. Half of us turned up, and then that there is a sort of a relation between the artist and their cultural worth or cultural position, or how much can you express within these structures, and how much you have to express through this structure as well. And that itself may be a kind of question about what if we weren't sitting here, would you still want to listen to what we had to say? So it's sort of interesting that it comes down to these ideas of political consciousness. So that was mine. Can I just tell you a silly story? I actually already said it to Haegue, but I got in a cab today and I was looking at the bumper sticker in front of in another car, and it said "coexist," written out of. Have you seen these? Written out of like the Islamic. The sea was written out of the Islamic star, like moon and the and so on. And you had like the yin and yang sign, and you had the Star of David. And I thought, oh, how great! Look at that. It's like, and it could maybe be a perfect little sticker for Brave New Worlds in a way. Like we are of so many different, positions, and we are actually put together. And maybe it's easier to think that the world's really united in this position. And the guy in the cab was actually a kind of quite a full-on evangelist who didn't believe that in this sticker, so that was kind of quite. And he said that was New Age crap. So I think it's interesting that, like, there is a kind of oneness that we might sort of try and make everything fit into, and it might not even be out on your doorstep, but.
Another question? We have that.
I guess I kind of, right now we have the pleasure of being your audience in Minneapolis, and kind of thinking about a music metaphor. Who do you guys consider your local audiences, or the audiences you work for as an artist? Now, not every artist works that way, but I'm just curious because it might help us as you're kind of on tour with us to think about where you're coming from and stuff. Could be a group of friends, it could be anybody, but what's the context you're producing?
Who are your local audiences? Right?
Yeah, just the idea of like, or when you're in the studio, the discourses you're working with in a way.
Right. Just as, for us, the reason why we put together exhibitions, first and foremost, is because of our local public, local audiences, people who come to the Walker. Do you have your own local audience?
It can be complex because I realize a lot of you are based in different places than where you're from. It's just the idea though, when you're producing, who you have in mind to bring your work to. If there is an idea, perhaps you just
I can answer about my experience. It's very hard to define. There's no like portrait robot of the like you. But I find myself in the following situation, and it's answering also the previous question about world market and global market and something. So I was finding myself, I'm coming from Romania, doing a drawing about maybe Israel on a wall of a museum in Germany, and somebody from Thailand laughing about it. And I found very interesting the situation. And in this sense, I'm a product of globalization. And I also, this show, I don't think have something to do with the market. I mean, it's like, that's why we try to do shows and exhibition in institution, because they can stay out a bit. And not that the market is something wrong. And I have to tell you directly, I'm coming from a poor context. And when first time I arrived in Berlin, they thought, oh, but Berlin now is so boring. No, it's like 10 years ago it was fantastic. I get to New York, they say, but 20 years ago it was fantastic, now it's so boring. And I got to the art market to sell, and now it's wrong. So, let's see like the part of it which is allowing us to communicate. And it's coming to the local audience. I'm working every week with a local newspaper in my country. But the drawings I do there, the drawings here in Walker, they do not differ. So in a way, maybe the subject matters, or they are contextualized more for the, let's say, audience in my own country or my own city. But the way and the energy in it, it's the same.
Anybody else wants to respond to that, or should we get another question? One more.
Yeah, I'm a little bit slow. I will collect all the answers and keep it at some point.
I guess Dan answered my question on how the artists respond to this, but at what point do the curators take into consideration that they have an American audience to cater to?
We translate the titles.
Should we say something?
No, I don't know, because art, it's funny. Yesterday this wonderful person from NPR came and asked me questions, and I got to talk a lot, and then at some point I did another of those generalizations. I was like, well, art knows no language, and then already somebody said to me, oh, I heard you in the radio saying that art knows no language, and I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. Now I'm a cliche, but the truth is like there's art. You use your eyes, and God, if you're not blind, you're good. You look at the work and you experience. So then, really, we cannot do anything about this work is produced. And seriously, I cracked the joke about translating the label, but that's about all we can do to make sure that Eric's video has, make sure that Eric puts subtitles so we all understand what he's saying to Core, and Core to him, and that's about it.
See, but this is why I love my co-curator, because she is such a believer, and I'm not, being condescending or patronizing,
He's a skeptic.
I think, kind of yin and yang, whichever is yang. I think she's actually more of yang, because, I'm much more of a skeptic.
I'm related to Haegue?
Huh? I'm much more of a skeptic, and, she just, always kind of, throughout the whole process, I felt like she kind of convinced me and kind of gave me a lot of courage, because she's the brave one. And well, sometimes we flip flop, and I guess I did actually, because I don't really believe. I'd rather say maybe art is multilingual rather than doesn't know language, and I always wonder about.
But she asked me the question.
No, but it's a good one. It's like, cinema is a universal language, it's a good one. I thought about that a lot, that again, because I come from that belief that, I'm shaped in a very particular way, and, a lot of thought comes from, that just rubbing against many different situations. So that I can apply that same principle to this question of who's my audience. So what is the American audience? We're probably dealing mostly with particular kind of class and particular level of education and assumption that they are going to know what we mean. That there is a certain level of understanding already. You know what I mean? So, there is a certain level of elitism as well. So I would actually.
Yeah, that's why we were.
Yeah. But then sometimes, I go too far in this skepticism, and just came and kind of dragged me back. So it's been a really interesting process of, you kind of have to be skeptical in many ways. But then there is something about. Aesthetic experience where I still don't believe that there is a such thing as universal aesthetic pleasure, but perhaps willingness to accept that, okay, well, something's aesthetically pleasing, then let's go with that.
I think for me, that as an artist, the audience is a difficult question, because you don't know them, and it's like a fighting against the ghosts. You don't know them, you don't see them, and you don't know when to meet and how to meet. But then again, audience is like a preconditional framework for working in art. It's not that I that I know and then that I customize my work for that local audience. No, you can't do that. But you kind of work with this precondition. There are audience, and you have to respect, and you have to be open enough to make a dialogue and communication with them. So it's like a very desperate but also like cruel situation. It's not like that relaxing thing. And also like in terms of talking about local audience, maybe in that question, I think that's the point that I have to come up with my arrogance, that I came here to win my audience, but not necessarily work on this existed local audience. I don't believe in the audience who are there for me. I have to work hard to win them. But at the same time, I have a romantic idea that I will meet like whoever I'm supposed to meet. So this is like very mystical, but at the same time very cruel situation. And I don't know, like as an institution, what relationship the institutions are working with the local audience. But I think an artist has different perspective.
One more question. Final question. You can do that, sir.
Okay, it's a really simple question. The connection between art and politics. Do you artists have any desire to change the world?
Well, I think this is the question of this exhibition. How we can change the world, or is it possible to change the world from art? And some years ago, I was completely skeptic about this. But suddenly something happened. I don't know when. I realized that maybe artists can't change the world, but art can change the world. I think the only way that the artist has to change the world is not intending to do so. It's the only way. Because it happens beyond his aim, beyond his voluntad, I don't know. His will. This is what I think about this.
We shouldn't add more to that, right?
Yeah.